This is Breaking Pressure, the voice of soccer reform, a podcast built to confront the broken U.S. youth soccer system and expose the pressures that are crushing real development. We're here to call it out: the pay-to-play platforms, the closed leagues, the politics gatekeeping talent, and erasing the voices of good coaches and local clubs. At our core, we believe in something better, one where players are developed to be brave, creative leaders. Inspired by the Kansas City Legends model and the training Legends for Life philosophy, this is where the next wave begins. Welcome to Breaking Pressure. Let's rebuild the game. Welcome back to Breaking Pressure. I'm your host, Brad Casper. We are here on episode 4. And no, your screen has not changed. We have a new guest in the studio today. We had a lot of feedback from our listeners, and they said, hey, could we tone it down a little bit with the IQ? And I said, I think we could. So let me introduce our next guest, Riley Cronin.
Hey. Good morning.
Thanks for being here.
It really wasn't that. It was also because we got feedback from our 13-year-old daughter. And our feedback from our 13-year-old daughter was like, I asked, hey, did you watch the show? Did you want to watch it? She doesn't have social media. So she's like, can we watch it together? And she goes, well, wait a minute. Is it going to be more entertaining than the last one? Because that was really boring.
Well,
so now we brought Riley in.
We got Riley in, and now we have to do his comedy show. Have you seen this? His fingers removed. And by the way, I haven't even introduced Sarah, so she jumped the gun again. Here we are. Yeah, right. So again, welcome to the studio. Sarah Casper, my wife and co-coach, alongside 4 or 5, how many ever teams we have, and my partner in life. And then Riley Cronin, who is our new partner in life.
Feels like it.
It's an open relationship.
That's right.
Oh, gosh. The director of coaching in Lee Summit and helps with all of the growth and development on the Lee Summit side. So as always, Riley, it's great to have you here. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about building an environment where creativity grows. And for those of you that have been listening to the last couple of shows, we started off talking about ego, fear, and the death of creativity. We talked about how to counter the ego and fear with a little bit more of a courage or approach to courage. And to find courage and to cultivate that, I think a large part of that requires an environment. So, again, we've been unpacking the ego and the fear, how it's killing creativity, and how courage is the antidote. Today, we're going to shift gears and introduce something different, and it's the Legends way of training. This is the environment, the philosophy, and the culture that we've built to give kids a place where creativity doesn't just survive, it thrives. And this is personal to us because the Legends Way is the heartbeat of what we do. It's about creating an environment that's less about control and more about freedom, less about perfection and more about free play, less about winning today and more about training legends for life. So, Riley, you are like me. We've grown up in this Legends system for way too long. Why don't we start with a little bit, since a lot of our listeners that are joining us may not know who you are. Give us a little bit of your background and your story and your journey within the soccer world.
Yeah, so I started playing for Legends before it was Legends. Andy Barney was in Kansas City area. Had grabbed a couple local teams and had introduced the skills, multiple skills. And it just took off. With that team, they basically went from the belly out bombers to the rockers who were unbeatable, right? And my younger brother actually joined that team. During that time, my dad tried everything he could to get Andy to coach my team because it was an independent team. They finally talked him into one Sunday every week, and it went on from there. So we got the skills later on in our soccer career. We had already been on the full field. We had already been introduced to passing triangles, passing patterns. So we got it when we were in 8th, 9th, 10th grade.
Okay.
Which little late, but not too late, right? It was very beneficial for us.
Well, I wasn't too far behind. I think I started around 5th, 6th grade.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yep.
I think with Andy, it was 88, 87 with our group
Okay.
going in, and then I think Legends actually started in 89.
89, yep.
Yep. So,
And that Rockers group was ridiculously good.
oh, yeah, it's the
wildly talented.
first couple jerseys you see when you walk in the facility.
Which is fun, right? It's fun to reminisce about those days. And what's funny is some of those guys were seniors when I was a freshman in high school, and so we got to catch the tail end of their kind of career on the high school stage, because back then club soccer wasn't what it is today.
No, it was not.
So when you think about your introduction into Legends, and you said you started skills a little bit later in life, maybe we set the stage of what the core philosophy is for Legends.
Yeah. So our basic core philosophy is we work on 7 skills, right? Earlier on in the age, and we want them being ball hogs very early on in the development stage, just because we want them growing the confidence. But first, failure has to come before the confidence comes. So you have to be willing to try the skills and fail.
Yeah, and we had this conversation the other day where, sometimes in these early days, we get so focused on what team are we on, who are we playing. Yeah. But instead of thinking about what team you're playing on, why are we not focused on making sure that we're checking the box on, are we ready to go and be successful at that next level? Because we were referencing a kid at some point where, mom and dad are a little bit upset that they're not playing on maybe the perceived top team, but they are just now learning to excel in that lower team where they're starting to get the idea that failing is part of this journey. And until you can accept that failure and really try to become a great legend style player, it's probably not a good time to start moving up just yet.
Yeah, Riley, can I ask, we talked about this the other day, and I think some of our listeners, just to give clarity to some of our listeners, but what is your early age of development? When do we start doing those skills, Riley?
As early as preschool.
Yep,
I believe Andy's at the maternity
ward.
That's right. He's like, hey, have you heard of Happy Feet? No, but seriousness, we have an early development program, which is our 4x4. We bring kids in from rec. We introduce them to the program. They train once a week. They have a game on the weekends, and we introduce 3 or 4 skills in that setting. It's a 6 to 8 week program, and they really just conquer that soccer balance using those skills and taking players on.
Which is, again, back to kind of the core philosophy. We believe in training, deceptive dribblers that can have success at all levels of the game. And to do that, you have to be able to master the ball at young ages, and then you've got to continue to have that ball mastery as you continue to grow. Well, you don't become a wizard on the ball by dishing it off every time you get it. And this is where it drives a lot of people crazy that don't know who the Kansas City Legends are, because they come to our environment and they're like, oh my gosh, this kid doesn't know how to pass. They don't see the game. They don't know the game. It's constantly. But what we do know is that when that ball is on your foot, how to be very skillful, how to take players on 1v1. And I would argue that 1v1s are kind of the center of the curriculum, especially at the early ages. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the 1v1s is the basis of everything. It's where it all starts. It's where that courage comes in. It's where that willingness to try the skills and the failure comes. Without the 1v1s, it really doesn't work, right? Because we have an environment where we have multiple 1v1s going on at once. So there's opening space, closing space, and they're trying the skill. So it may be one set skill. Maybe we're working on the Maradona turn. Maybe we're working on the scissor. And everybody has to try that during that skill. But the great thing about the 1v1s is they're also working on that brave, creative leader taking that player on, but they're also working on the dirty side of the ball. They're working on the defensive side, right? They have to play defense. Nobody can hide. Where you have a player maybe in a 5v5 game, one player can stay off to the side, maybe not touch the ball at all, maybe touch the ball 2 times and a half. In this environment, we have 2-minute sessions where they're touching on the ball at least half that time, if not more.
Right. So let's paint a picture for those that have never been to a Legends facility. Right. Inside a Legends facility, there are 3 different size fields that are built. One is for our juniors program, which is I don't even know the dimensions of it, but it's a super small, tight, constructed field.
It's a hallway.
Yeah. And then you get into what we call our red fields. It's the size of a 77 or 99 box.
I think 7v7.
7v7. And then you get into what we call our green fields, which is the size of an outdoor 11v11 box. Right, so think about this. We're training kids until the age of about 10, 11, just kind of depends on when they switch, inside the space of a 7v7 or 9v9 box on an outdoor field. And we put walls all around it, right? So this is an indoor facility that literally puts walls around a very small space. And then we put as many kids as possible in that small space, and we say, go learn how to be calm through the chaos. Sarah, you've been in this environment and you didn't grow up in it. So talk to us about what you witnessed as you started to move over to adopt the Legends way.
Yeah, I mean, I fell in love with Legends right away, and simply because my husband's a legend.
I would say the shirt, but it's not worth it. I still want to be friends.
Yeah, so I grew up in Arizona. Okay, so I grew up with a completely different club, and I want to say a very similar philosophy in a lot of ways. Because we didn't have walls, most of our practice outdoors in Arizona, because it's like really year round.
Well, expect an email from Andy Barney saying, no, you're not even close to the Legends philosophy. But.
No, well, we're not, because there's a lot of things that are done differently. But one of the things that is similar is I remember my coach Barry, he would put cones in a really small space, and he would lock us into this space, right? So you just do a grid out on the outdoor field. And inside that, we had to rip our skills over and over again as quickly and as controlled as possible. And that was how we did majority of like our sessions and our training. So we didn't have boxes. We were outdoor, and he put cones, and he said, you can't go outside the cone. You can't hit another ball. You have to be under control. And he used like a whistle tactic. So every time he blew the whistle, it was like hit your Cruyff. Every time he blew a whistle, he did, so it wasn't as much of like freedom and being creative, but he was embedding kind of that fundamental like dribbling, touches, control, skill, those pieces at an early age. And then we, as our team like progressed and evolved, we ended up our kind of like in high school years, we ended up at Santos, which was coached by Coach Barry as well, but then also Louis Dabo. And Louis Dabo was actually known, for his skill base. You knew Louis for two things. It was skill and fitness, and so Louis, he was he grew up internationally, and he brought kind of that style of play, like that street soccer, that Pele style
Which
soccer.
was connected to Pele. Louis had some connection to Pele over the years, correct?
Yeah, that's from, I didn't see or witness any of that, but rumor has it, he's had wonderful connections in the sport of soccer.
Well, and that's a great segue, right? Like when we talk about our environment and we look across the landscape of the greats within this game, and I don't use that word lightly. You're talking like the Pelés, the Maradonas, the younger guys like the Messis of the world, the Ronaldos, the Ronaldinhos. These guys are all special in a very, very different way. The Lamine Yamals, you can tell they're special in very different ways. And a large part of what Andy did, Andy Barney, who's the founder of the Kansas City Legends, and we'll put links to his books and all of his commentaries that he's put out over the years, because there's just a tremendous library and a wealth of knowledge that outlines his kind of journey as he tried to, as he put together this process of training what he calls Legends for Life. And it's a brilliant it's a brilliant piece of literature that I think a lot of people, if you give it a chance, would find great value in it, because it's all rooted around these great players and how they grew up and trained to become great. And the one thing that they had in common was they all trained in kind of these inner city, tight spaces, walls. The ball is always on your foot. It doesn't get away from you. You're constantly on touches and working on skills and being creative through the streets of wherever they grew up. And when you step into a Legends facility, we try to replicate that type of an environment with these walled fields, right, that don't allow the balls to get away. And my favorite thing is you go to an outdoor practice, and I just want, especially at the younger ages, I want you to do this. This is absolutely hysterical. Pick a kid and count, on your watch, time. How much time do they actually chase the ball around the field, especially at younger ages? I think you'll find that about 40% of the practice is actually spent chasing the ball somewhere around this massive field because it just rolls for days. When we grew up, we didn't have turf, so the grass would actually stop the ball.
I grew up on dirt.
Trust me,
I played in dirt. I think like Diablo Stadium is where I got most of my battle wounds from the dirt.
Well, and we trained on dirt fields as well because Andy thought it gave us an advantage to play quicker. So we'd leave this dust bowl just covered in nonstop dirt 3 nights a week. But yeah, I mean, again, back to this, the ball rolls on this turf and these kids are constantly chasing it. If you're in our environment, and just to take you through a typical practice, we spend the first, call it 15 to 20 minutes of every practice just going through the mechanics of skills, right? You've got to be willing to learn it, and you have to learn the technical skill to a mastery level. Because if you're going to rip it at all levels of the game, you've got to have tremendous discipline, tremendous technique. And so every practice we start with 15 to 20 minutes of skills. And that ball doesn't leave their foot. They're not chasing it. It's not rolling away from them. It is more touches in 20 minutes than most kids will get in an entire 1.5 hour, 2 hour training session in an outdoor field.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Can I just, I'm going to go back just to my story in Arizona because I think I mentioned this once. I had this moment, like a light bulb or a profound moment. But when I grew up playing, a lot of it, I mean, when we think back of playing as a kid, your loyalty was to your friends and to the sport, right? You'd play in the streets, you would do pickup games. If you went to a facility, you'd find other kids and you would just kind of play. Well, with my family, we would actually play at my grandfather's house, and we call it Tata. So we'd play at Tata's house in his front yard, and his front yard was probably the size of a 9v9 outdoor box, right? And he had actually a barrier, so he had a fence, but the fence was made out of either concrete or bricks, and then it had these wrought iron posts going in between it. And that's where my cousins and I would all gather and play. So we played in a small box in his front yard all the time.
Plus, you had feral cats running around the neighborhood, so you had to dribble around not only players, but feral cats to get around.
We had challenges.
That's where Sarah learned to rainbow the local cats. It was
That is true. That is true.
So Riley, take us from a warm-up of skills into a transition of 1v1.
So in the transition to the 1v1s, after we've done the skills at different ages, right? It's different transitions, right? So younger ages, we'll focus on 1 or 2 skills, and we'll have them do that skill through the 1v1. Each 1v1 will be a 2-minute round with a 2-minute rest in between. So during that rest period, we're talking to the players, explaining why we're attacking the space behind the player, how we're ripping the move, coming out on the strong foot, the importance of doing the skill under pressure, right? A lot of the kids, when they first start out, they try to do the skill, which is awesome, but they do it going backwards. Where's the pressure? The pressure's in front, right? So getting them to face up the opponent and really take them on and fail is one of the hardest parts for the younger kids, right? As we transition to the middle-aged kids, your ones that are playing 77, 99, that group you have to slow down.
Is that funny that's the middle-aged kid?
I know.
99?
I know.
I mean,
it's the transition. It's the transition.
Yeah.
It truly is. Because you're coming from the development leagues where it's primarily 4v4 and 5v5 to that first year of 7v7, which the field just looks huge on these little kids. And it's small considering the 11v11 field, right? But It's still huge compared to what we train in.
Yeah.
Right? So it's just all about getting the most out of whatever the environment is. And our environment gets the most out of the kids because of the skills. The balls never go away. The 1v1 training sessions work on 3 things, right? Courage, and we're implementing the skill right away after we've done it and the warm-ups. We're working on defense and offense, but we're also working on the fitness side of it because it's a nonstop sprint. The ball never goes out of bounds. The ball is always in play. And they have to work. They have to work.
Yeah, and so for those that don't know, in our environment, 1v1s are 2 to 4 minute rounds right, where you are just battling. And then we can set rules within the 1v1 environment where we can do, side panels to score. So if we don't have goalies, we don't have goalies, right? We set rules on how you can actually score goals to focus on your technique of finishing. We can set rules on what we call make it, take it. If you get out there, and this happens quite a bit, maybe somebody is getting a little bit lazy on the defensive side of the ball. Well, we're going to change the rules to say it's make it, take it. If you don't want to defend, you're not going to touch that ball in that 2 to 4 minute round, right? So we make it more complicated for them. And these rules that we stack on become, just part of the development process that our kids all know incredibly well. But here's what I love, right, Sarah, is when you walk in to a Legends practice from the outside, it looks like just
absolute chaos.
Absolute chaos.
Absolute chaos.
Walk us through what you tell parents as they're coming into our environment and seeing what we're trying to do.
Oh, I tell them it's chaos. I tell them it's absolute chaos. But listen, so before I talk about that, I think when we think about kids and playing, kids actually thrive and they create in chaos. Yeah. I mean, when we think of just take them outside the soccer field and when think of your little kid, growing up as they're playing, look at a playground in a recess. It's absolute chaos. They're running everywhere. They're doing all kinds of things. And they actually thrive in that environment because they're meant to create, right? So they're meant to imagine. They're meant to, just have that freedom to allow their brain to just do whatever they want to do. It's a mass chaos. So when I play with, our girls are even growing up, they're getting a little bit older than that early play stage. But gosh, we would imagine and play all different types of things. We would just foster, we would play some Octonauts game, and we would put animals all over the house and go rescue them, and we could create anything that we want. And I think in our society, what we've transitioned out of is a lot more structured play. And so now you kind of set up like, we're just going to play with blocks and that's all we're going to do, or we're just going to play. And I think if I could set the stage for that, this is kind of what we do within Legends. We allow them the freedom to play. I know you're talking about rules and all this stuff, but that's why it looks like mass chaos, is because they're really just creating and they're playing and they have the freedom to do that.
Well,
so
yeah, good.
Yeah, I was going to say, so when you walk into one of these boxes, it does feel like absolute chaos, and I acknowledge that, because it's really intimidating, I think, for a lot of parents. One, they're afraid their kids are going to get hurt, and there's no doubt where I'm like, how have we not, taken a head off, right? But it's a controlled chaos in some sense, just because we're in there, managing and watching, but this is where it's very intimidating. And if you're not used to an environment like that, and if you're used to playing maybe on a different type of structure that's more tactical, or you're waiting in lines, or it's a little bit slower, we're not slow. We're so fast paced. I jumped on the field with the 14s and the 12s a couple times. And even I'm old, but even now, that ball moves so fast for me. I feel like I can't keep up because it's such a speed of play that they have to adapt to. And I think that's where their brains kind of foster and grow the most.
Well, and they're not just dealing with the person across from them, right? Because there's multiple rounds of 1v1s going on. So talk about the role of having, 4 or 5 1v1 rounds going on all around you, and what that means from a development and how you have to process the field as well.
Yeah, so you may rip a skill, pull it off, beat your defender, and then all of a sudden space closes down because there's another game going on. Or you rip a shot you think it's going in, and all of a sudden a body runs in front of it and blocks it just because another game's going on. So it's a matter of dealing with that immediate disappointment of that and going on to the next thing. So what comes next? What comes next? Yeah, that resilience, right? Building that and knowing that it's all being done for the development of the kid, but also it's kind of fun to watch. It's like a little science project. So you take a player from 5 to 16, and it's just incredible to see the growth, right? I mean, an athlete to an athlete, but even a non-athlete, right? Somebody who may be considered a middle athlete, kind of like they're good, but they're not going to be great. They may play in high school. They may not go to college. The development that happens over those core years is insane. I've seen kids get scholarships to college that should never have.
Well, and let's build on that a little bit, right? Because our environment remove some of the athleticism from the game. Meaning, if you have a really big, fast, strong player, right, and it's typically the number 9 on most teams that we play against, that
Kick it long.
we just try to get the big
'em
ball
run.
up to the fast player up front and let him go put it in the back of the net. But that big, fast player on a 7v7 style box, right, the field is not big. You don't have the open room to just unleash the speed, the God-given talent and speed that you've been blessed with. So you have to slow down and actually figure out how to be creative and build around them. So even for some of these really athletic players that could go far in the game because of just sheer athleticism, they get developed in a way that creates separation, and their upside in the game is so much greater versus those that have not. And I think we witnessed a lot of that over this past weekend in St. Louis, and we'll talk a little bit more about that because we just came back from a tournament. But let's keep building, because we started with 1v1s, and how are 1v1s a core philosophy? Well, they are, right? Because in that 1v1, it fosters the creativity, the use of skills. We can work on so many aspects of the game. You spend 50% of the time attacking and hopefully 50% of the time working your butt off defending, right? If there's an imbalance there, then you need to work on different aspects of your game. But we really do this through their entire career, even up to the 18, 19 years old. But when we get closer to the 10, 11, 12, we start implementing more of a 2v2 style. And what I hope you hear in this kind of core philosophy is everything that we do is about touches on the ball and playing, touches on the ball and playing. And the repetition that we get alone within the environment, within the philosophy, just creates tremendous amount of separation from the average player that's out there training within other club environments.
Yeah, can I jump in just for a minute, because Brad's calling it 1v1s, but actually we call it fun v fun.
Yes, fun v fun.
And so it seems so intense, and it is really intense, but it is really fun. Even when I'm thinking about it, as like my brain's kind of picturing it, and I'm smiling because I'm like, gosh, those are so fun. Even though they are incredibly intense. I ran into a alumni Legends player. She came back over the summer, and she was watching some of the practices with her old coach Jen, and I was standing next to her. I didn't know she was an alumni, but we started talking, and I was like, where do you go to school? And she was describing this, and I said, what do you think about coming back this summer? And she goes, you know what? She goes, I miss 1v1s. I never thought I would say that playing in this environment, but now that I'm away from it, I really miss it. So they are a lot of fun. And our kids, even though they're in these drag out like dog fights, if you will, and they're battling, they're smiling, they're laughing, they're coming off the field and they're saying, like, that was fun. Are we going to keep playing? Like, they want to keep doing it. And I think that's important to identify before we move into those 2v2s.
Well, and my mind's going so many different directions, right? Because I love this conversation. I'm about to explode. The first thing, I'm going to give a live example. Like in the college stage, I don't recall doing a 1v1 ever in college. Yeah, no. And what's funny is in my college experience, again, I played as a left back. Right, this was before we numbered all of the positions. So I was a left back on the field on what was probably a 4-4-2 or a 4-3-3 type of a format. I'm not left-footed. I'm not an overly big guy that you would think of as a defensive, an outside defender. But I could play the game. And I remember vividly in my freshman year, we were doing one of the preseason games that didn't really matter, but you're just trying to get everything moving. And I had ripped a Maradona in the game around somebody. And then my coach at halftime had this conversation with me. He goes, you can't rip those at college level. He goes, you're going to get killed. And
I just did.
And then, like the Legends mindset kicked in. And I don't have to say this to his face, right? But I walked away and I was like, well, I'm going to rip a damn Maradona in every game at the college level to show you that, yes, you can do skills at this level. You guys choose not to. And what I struggle with that statement is, when we think about the development over time, the high school level, the college level, they get away from the creativity side, the 1v1s. We're now so tactical and so methodical, and here's the decision you need to make in this situation, that we've eliminated the creativity. And we've said this for years. We spend 5, 6, 8 years coaching kids to be creative, and then you put them in an environment and they coach the creativity out of you within a short amount of time. Yeah. So you've really got to understand that the core to our curriculum is an environment that is more of an artistic approach. Go be free in your thinking, go explore and make this game as fun as possible. And then you, over time, and I think this is really the problem on the bigger stage, like, why can we not create a Lamine Yamal on the international stage, or the Messis, or all of these greats over the years? If you ask me, it's because our philosophy becomes so rigid in our thinking the older that we become, that we can't do it. And we talked about Diego Luna on the last one, because he was a breath of fresh air. We don't know how to. I haven't turned on comments onto YouTube yet, but because
simply because we don't know how.
I don't know how. But
Rookie.
GTS it.
Yeah. But I'm sure I'm going to get all kinds of responses. Oh, Diego Luna's not that great. Okay, but he was one of the most exciting players to watch in that entire tournament, right?
Yeah.
And so I value his approach to the game. We valued his humbleness that we talked about in the last episode. But overall, again, we need these creative players, but we don't allow the environment to foster at the higher levels, because again, we circle back to it's about the win versus about the development. And I get it, that changes as you get older, but at these early ages, I don't need you to be joysticked around the field. I need you to learn the game. I need you to love the game. 1v1s does that. And then we get into some of the passing and connections when they're 9, 10, 11, which is 2v2s and 3v3s. Riley, talk a little bit about that in terms of our curriculum.
Yeah, 2v2s introduces first defender, second defender, first attacker, second attacker, right? So overlaps and underlaps, skills, and what do you do off the ball? If you're not on the ball, how do you move, right? If you're on the ball and you have a partner, how do you pass? How do you connect? How do you take players on? So it starts introducing the combination play that goes great with our skills, right?
Yeah, but Riley, these are done in small spaces. It doesn't translate to the big field. Talk about that.
Look at
you, Riley.
look at your rondos that a traditional team would do.
Yeah.
Are they in tight spaces? Yeah. Same thing with the 2v2s, but it's done with multiple 2v2s going on. So space is constantly opening, space is constantly closing down. You're looking for that pass through traffic, which is the hardest pass to give, right?
Yeah. And again, go back to your outdoor training session and go find a rondo of somebody. Count how many touches your kid gets on the ball. Count how many times that they have success with more than 4 or 5 passes. Count how many times, especially at the early ages. And again, I'm not saying that rondos aren't appropriate. I like rondos. I think they're fun in different areas, and you can put some really unique games together through them. I'm not against them. I'm just saying at these younger ages, like, if you think that this is really teaching them the game, it's not. What you're teaching them is that you're really depriving them of touches on the ball and more of a consistent approach to development, if you ask me. But again, the older you get, you can build into them. Just let the soccer IQ grow. When you're 12 or 13, you can process the field differently than you can when you're 7, 8, 9. 7, 8, 9, be a bog.
Yep.
Go rip skills. Go beat players. Go take players on. And Andy uses the great example, like, if you are an avid reader, right, we don't yell at somebody, oh, you just keep reading over and over and over. Like, you're such a book hog, right? You just no. We praise them because they are learning a discipline that's helping them grow dramatically. And if I told you that being a ball hog, right, it helps you grow dramatically in the game, why do we tell them not to do it? Because we're a culture that wants to share. We want to pass. We want to, play well together. And this is hard because I think it comes back to ego, Sarah, that we've been harping on over the last couple of episodes. But as we think about ego in terms of the younger age of trying to work with others, it's hard to counter and go against that grain a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think because at younger ages, and we're all very egocentric. Like, think of kids playing in
Speak
school.
for yourself. Riley and I are just fine.
Sitting next to 2 really big egos.
I don't know how it fit in this room.
Can
No
we
idea.
change the podcast name In Between 2 Egos?
In between 2 egos.
Instead of In Between
Did she
2
say
friends.
eagles?
Is that a dad joke?
It is. I got my first one in today.
Good.
No, just in the finger trick. That was.
Yeah. So when you think of kids at very early ages, like preschool, even into early elementary school, I mean, it's very egocentric. They're self-centered and focused individually. They have parallel play. So they're not really like playing with other people. They're just playing next to other people, right? Or other kids. And then it evolves over time. And I think that's one of the things that I love about Legends is we really foster the natural development of like where their brain is at different phases of their own life's development, their life stage or span, if you will. Okay, so that's what I kind of really appreciate is because, yeah, we teach them and we kind of foster that egocentrism very early because that's what they know. They don't see the world beyond that. I mean, heck, my 13, sorry, Sophia, my 13-year-old is just now realizing that I'm in the world. Right? Right? She's just now, I'm carrying groceries. She's like, oh, Mom, do you need help? I'm like, oh yeah, thanks for seeing the world around you, right? And so we just kind of like really like hone in and foster that early development with where they are in their life and giving them the confidence to do that. And I think there is a big misconception. I think if we look at Legends, and because I'm an outlier, I guess. I'm an outlaw. I wasn't, raised in the Legends. And by the way, I have to compliment Andy Barney because Andy he's built this club. Early you were describing maybe 1989. Is that when we started?
89 is when the club was official. Before that, he was in his garage with a mirror working on skills.
Yeah, and so he did this because
I'm pretty sure he invented the rock wheel, didn't he?
He did.
He started it.
Flintstone era. It wasn't a garage. He had his cave.
His cave.
So I think, and he's studied the game. He really has. And he's breaking down these players that you were identifying earlier because he's done the research on them to really say what makes them different. And he's brought that wealth of knowledge here to Kansas City. And he has truly the longest existing club in the area. On top of that, he has branched out and we have sister clubs.
Yep.
All over different states, and I think that's truly amazing, especially in our modern time, because my clubs that I played for, they no longer exist. I think I don't know what's happened in Arizona because I'm not there, but my guess is,
Here, I'll play the intro to our podcast and I'll tell you what happened to those clubs.
I do know I do know what's happened, but it's really sad because these are where they're getting pushed out, boxed out. You have all these big Amazon, clubs that are coming in and taking out these homegrown places. But Andy's been resilient through it all, and it's because we're doing something right, And so, yeah, I have to give him credit because I think that's a big piece of it. I think the other side is what we look at, and we could probably talk about it with St. Louis, is that you were talking about maybe athleticism. Right. And a lot of coaches go for that. Like and I always talk about our Legends players in comparison. We go play another team that, maybe is an ECNL team or just from a different club. And man, all those kids look athletic.
Wildly athletic.
I feel like we are the what do I call us?
The Bad News Bears.
Yeah. Or like we're Mighty Ducks.
We are the Mighty Ducks.
And we're facing the Hawks, right? But then we go out and over time in that development, then you get to see really the beauty come out in the game. And so, yeah, because athleticism, it will get you to a certain point, but at some point you're going to meet other players that are just as athletic, just as fast. So what's going to make you different?
How do you separate yourself?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think, we need to take a step back and discuss kind of the St. Louis weekend because I think there's a lot of fun things to talk about, but I don't think it's for this podcast because I want to stay kind of focused on the core philosophy here. And I want to read this to you because we put it together and I think it's pretty good. And it started with a lot of people ask, why does this work? Why does the Legends way work? Why does the environment produce such creative players? And the answer is because we're willing to let go of control, right? We're not scripting every move. We're not giving kids the answers. We're giving them the problems and letting them figure it out. We are now in a culture where we want to give everybody, freedom to fail, right? And then how can you learn from it? How can you get better from it? And so I think that, the 1v1s, the 2v2s, put them consistently in that environment, and over time it starts to create some tremendous separation. Now, that's uncomfortable to a lot of adults, but it's exactly what kids need, right? Growth doesn't happen in comfort zones. Creativity doesn't happen in straight lines. It happens when kids feel free to explore, free to fail, and free to succeed on their own.
Yeah, and I think that's where, that ego and fear come in, because we are in a culture that says, be afraid of failure, don't fail, right? And our environment says fail, because that's how you learn.
You have to.
You have to.
You have to.
You're not going to be successful every single time.
I've had multiple conversations with parents that are asking, hey, why is my kid kind of far behind? Not far behind, but like missing out. I said, because they're afraid to fail. Right now, the quicker you get to that failure point, the quicker you get to ripping those skills, trying those skills under pressure, the quicker you're going to summit. I mean, the quicker you're going to get to that next stage, right?
Yeah,
and it's always about failure.
Because you start ripping them at silly times. And we had this statement on last one. Like, we talked about ripping Maradonas out of the back, and Sarah's brother made a comment, well, that's good. We should talk about what age that's appropriate. And that was interesting, because it's not that we at young ages especially, you have full freedom to go anywhere on the field and do whatever you want. And as they get older, we talk about, can we find when it's appropriate to rip certain skills versus others. Yeah. But we also landed on this idea that if I have a girl that came over as a 13-year-old that's never played in the Legend system, and I restrict her to just doing Maradonas in this section of the field, her development curve is going to be very, very slow to catch up. So, in my mind, I'm sitting here going, well, maybe there isn't an age restriction. Maybe that kid can do a Maradona wherever the heck they want on the field, because we're going to force it. And by the way, this kid that I have in my mind is wildly athletic and is going to be brilliant at this game, right? But what we needed her to do at this point is to slow down and learn how to be skillful within the first couple of touches. And so much so, I think we're going to mandate every touch that she has to be skill within 2 touches. And that is going to drive...
I can't wait to know who he's talking about, because we have so many kids that you're just describing.
So that's going to drive so many listeners probably crazy, because, you're not teaching I'm teaching a habit, right? And a habit is to think differently than everybody else. Because when you bring in a kid from outside of our club into our environment, they are robotic in their motions. You have to be able to start becoming a free thinker, and it starts with breaking old habits, right? And just starting by ripping a skill or being creative in different ways first, and then we can grow into some of the additional parts of the game.
Yeah, and listen, I'm super excited. My brother's going to be on this podcast in hopefully a few episodes, and he's been a part of this game. I mean, I grew up playing soccer with him. He was a great player, and so Moose, I'm excited to have you here. And one of the most important things too is to have really open dialogue, because we want to have these discussions and talk about what we're seeing throughout, like our country, if you will, and so we'll get there and have some of these, fun debates and dialogues, all with good intention and good hearts.
Yeah. And open minds, right? Yeah. We don't pretend, again, I'm going to go back to ego. We don't pretend that our way of development is the only way of development. It's what we prefer because we think that there's value that it brings to the game. Riley, you've been around this long enough as a player, as a father, right? As a coach.
Yeah. How many kids did you bring through the Legends system?
So I have 6 kids. 5 played through the Legends at different levels, right? One went really, really high, went all the way to the pro level, right?
Yep.
And then one of them just played for fun and just stopped playing this year at high school, right?
Can they all do the finger trick?
They can all do the finger trick.
Can they all do Maradonas?
They can all do Maradonas.
Then you nailed it.
I know. Hey, they're going to be successful.
I think.
But and that's what I was going to get on. The Legends philosophy, the Legends way of training, transitions so much into life.
Yeah.
That ability to fail and fail and fail and fail. I would want to count how many former Legends players actually own their own companies, have actually gone out there and are entrepreneurs and aren't afraid to try something, right? To break the mold.
Yeah, they're leaders.
Yep.
And I think that's one thing too, outside of what you're describing, resiliency, all of the stuff. They're also those free thinkers, they're decision makers, they're leaders, like they are truly like courageous in life, and I married one. But I'm not going to feed his ego.
And I'm going to circle
'Cause he
back.
has flaws.
Yeah, trust me. I'm going to circle back to the quote that we used on the last one because I think it's so appropriate for the way that we describe what we do. And it's a quote from Winston Churchill that says, "Success is the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm." Right? If you are somebody that moves your kid from one club to another so that they can always be with the top group of talented players, so-called talented players, right? You've never put them in an environment where they're able to fail, and they're never in an environment long enough where that they have to learn how to, develop and grow through that failure. So the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm, it's a learned behavior. Yeah. But we don't teach kids that anymore, right? We teach them that, hey, if you fail, go find, complain. Go find, it's not your fault, it's somebody else's fault. We don't own our stuff anymore. In our environment, you own your stuff. It is 1v1 dogfights for majority of these practices. It is mano a mano you, right? You are now at the core of this. And I will tell you, the separation that brings, especially at the younger ages, is what I think makes a lot of these Legends teams so dynamic when you're playing against them. And it's undoubtedly, I'm going to get some comment, oh yeah, but you guys get rolled when somebody's highly organized. And I said, well, be patient, right? We're not training champions for today. We're training champions for 10 years down the road, right? Yeah. And we're doing the hard work today.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference. I mean, what you were talking about what we see in other teams or maybe the other side or culture is what we're teaching kids is to please, to perform, and to perfect, right? And that's such a toxic model for like our humanity, our life. I mean, it puts us under so much pressure, and it's a detriment to our mental health.
Yeah.
Well, all right, we're 45 minutes into this sucker, and I knew we were going to have a good conversation, and this needs to be a part one of multiple part series where we continue to talk about how we do it and what we do. And I think one of the things that I want to do with this podcast is give some additional tools to those around us that want to learn more about how we do it and why we do it. You always talk about understand the why, right? And I think there's a lot of growth that we can that can happen within this podcast series around the why, and then we can provide some tools to help. So let me leave you with this. So if ego and fear kill creativity, then courage and environment bring it back to life. And that's what the Legends Way is all about, building a culture where creativity isn't just encouraged, it's expected. And if we can keep creating environments like this, we won't just be developing better players, we'll be shaping stronger, braver, more creative people. That's the long game. That's the movement. Thank you for listening to Breaking Pressure. Riley, Sarah, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having us. Thanks for having me.